Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast, joining me via Zoom from her office in Utah County, is my friend, Dr. Lacey Bagley. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Bagley.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I'm going to probably go between Dr. Bagley and Lacey during this podcast. She has started a therapy. Will you tell us the name of I'll let you introduce what you've started.
Yes. I've opened Celebrate Therapy in Provo, right here on Center Street, to celebrate the LGBTQ community and to provide mental health and relational health services to the community here.
And a few people have mentioned Celebrate Therapy to me, and as a great resource, as I get a lot of especially requests from parents wanting good resources for their LGBTQ children. So this is partly to connect parents and LGBTQ with Celebrate Therapy. It's for Lacey to share her story, and Lacey will probably give principles of just good therapy to help others that are trying to find a good therapist or just navigate this. Lacey has a PhD she has a PhD in marriage and family therapy from Brigham Young University. She's 13 years married to her husband with 2 kids. And I'll let you share with our listeners how you identify.
Identify as bisexual and use that interchangeably with queer and cisgender.
Okay. And tell our listeners a little bit about how you identify with your relationship with the LDS Church.
Yep. So I'm still a practicing member of the church, which means I attend church when my kids aren't sick. And my husband and I keep our temple covenants and are very committed to one another.
And so I think thank you for just introducing yourself. So our joint prayers, this will just be helpful for you. I hope to learn some things from Lacey, from her personal story, as well as her education and clinical work, and that prayer is for all of you. Also, this is a bright, capable woman with a personal story, but great education and clinical expertise, and I like the way she's bringing that all together to help and support LGBTQ people. So I'd love to have you just kind of introduce yourself, where you grew up, a little bit about your family, and I'll just turn it over to you, Lacey.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, which I always emphasize because it's the part of Minnesota where there's not a whole lot of people. So pretty rural area. My parents are both active in the church. My mom was a convert when she was young at age 9. And my dad was raised in the church, although active, navigating that with his family. It was a little tricky. So when they got married, they met at a stake young adult dance, and our stake spans 3 states.
Wow.
So my mom was in South Dakota. My dad was in northern Minnesota. They met at the stake dance, of all places, right? And they committed to stay in the church and to stay married. So you can see that theme is important in my life as well.
And I'm thinking it's cold up there too. It's cold in Utah today. So I'm thinking when I see northern Minnesota, I'm thinking, well, that's even colder.
Yes, it is common to see -40 in the winter times. But it's what we know, and we love being outside and being active in the snow.
Talk about your testimony growing up and early childhood. And I think...
Yeah, northern Minnesota, not a lot of people. So even less number of members of the church. Very rare to find other members, even in my exact age. So often in my ward, there was maybe a group of 3 or 4 of us that went through primary and youth together. And occasionally other families would move in and move out. But there was just a handful of us that were kind of like our little family youth group. So outside of my ward, which was just like 100 people on a good day, right? I was an anomaly in my community. So I connected with other kids who were religious and queer. We had a lot of Lutheran folks. My best friend is a Lutheran pastor and is also queer. And so we just created this safe haven for ourselves to explore our identities and have continued to show up for each other and celebrate each other along the way.
Talk about just experiences with your dad. I know you had a really good experience with your dad in the church.
Yeah, it was a defining moment in my church attendance and commitment, as well as my testimony. My siblings, I have a sibling older than me and younger than me that left the church when they were about 13, 14. And I hit 14 and felt very much the same way as them. I was sitting in a Sunday school lesson and just every fiber in my being told me to get out of that room. I didn't want to be there anymore. So I walked out of the church building and just went and sat outside, waiting for my family to be done with church. And around the corner walks my dad. And he was just curious. And he was like, "Hey, what are you doing out here?" And I was like, "Dad, I don't believe it. I am done." He said, "Yeah, I get that. I don't believe it right now either." And my eyes, you should went 400 times bigger than was possible. I just I'd never had heard him say anything like that. We never had conversations like that. And I was like, "Well, so what do you mean?" And he was like, "Well, there are times when I believe and times when I don't believe. And in the times when I don't believe, I keep living my covenants because there will be that belief again." And that was profound for me to see that there was nuance in testimony, nuance in your commitment to the church and to your belief. And that nuance and spirituality has carried me really far in my life.
That is a parenting home run moment for a father to be open and vulnerable. My reaction would have probably been fear and probably given you a checklist of things to sort of undo this feeling about you. But for him to be open is a sign of trust and confidence in you and natural parenting skills, I think, on his part.
Yeah, he doesn't recall the event when we've talked about it. And I can't imagine the headspace he was in because my brother, just older than me, was going through so much emotionally and with his own testimony and church attendance. So they had just been through this with one of my siblings. Imagine that fear, right? Would have been pretty intense for him. So for him to just meet me where I was at was, literally life-changing.
Talk about that term, meet me where I'm at. That's a great term, Lacey.
Yes. It's to say, I see you. I see your struggle and I'm not running from it and I'm not afraid of it. And I'm not going to, invalidate your experience. I'm going to sit with you, right? I see you're on the sidelines. Let me come sit with you and listen. And then share in your vulnerability with empathy and connection.
Wow. That's rewindable for some of our listeners. That's great. Talk about, unless you want to talk about anything before this segment, just talk about coming out to yourself, your spouse, family, just your journey to understand your sexual orientation.
Yep. Right before that, I would say, so then in my teen years, I just committed hard to the church. So I was living the standards, received my Young Women Medallion and the Presidential Award in seminary. I don't know if people still do that, but
cool.
I even have those awards. So did I lean into the gospel to go as far as scrupulosity? I would say no, because the shame and guilt wasn't there for me. But I have learned how to manage my relationship with the church a little bit better. That was maybe not as healthy as it should have been during that time. So then coming out was when I was about 15 or 16, because the age in the church for getting to date is 16. And at that time, I was committed. I was all in, right? So I said, okay, about to be 16. Who can I date? Right? Looked around me, and there were boys in my school and in church that I was curious about and like excited to connect with. And there were girls that I was like, ooh, that spark of curiosity was there too. And I didn't know what to do with it, because I knew the church's standards were to live and be committed to a monogamous heterosexual relationship. And so I did some research, and I don't know, I need to do a little bit more research now and find this case study again. But I found a case study that was 6 same-sex attracted individuals in the church, and 3 of which stayed in the church, 3 who left. And the 3 who stayed had a really stable life, really stable future. And that was appealing to me. So that was a moment of clarity and commitment to say, okay, this is an important part of who I am, and the church is an important part of who I am too. So I'm going to commit to the church's standards and just pursue dating boys, which is a privilege of the bisexual experience and unique.
Talk about why I think most listeners understand that. Talk about, you use the word privilege of the bisexual experience. Just explain that a little bit more.
Yep. I think oftentimes people will say, well, can't you just choose, right? You can choose your sexuality. I think that was pretty much in my youth how it was talked about. I hope we have changed and progressed to know that sexuality is not a choice, but an innate identity, a divine identity that you are born with and probably always have had and always will have. But I did have the spark and interest in men. And so as I was dating, it was fewer men probably than the typical heterosexual straight woman. There were very few men that I really felt bonded and connected to and sexually attracted to. And so I had this line in college that was like, well, I'll just get married when I'm 30. I'm not going to worry about it because it was just like too confusing and difficult. And so when I found my husband and we met, it was a profound experience for me that here's a person that I could love who would love me in return wholly.
That's cool. Talk about your undergrad, where you went and what you're first studying and kind of that journey, because I think your career started at one point and ended up in a different point.
It did. I grew up, like I said, in a rural area, and we struggled financially and had some beautiful support from our community for my dad to pursue education, so that my high school years, we were a little more financially stable. So in my head, though, was this message of like, just do a job that you can get rich doing. Like that was my pursuit. So I went into advertising. That was the only thing I could think, like, I didn't even know what it was, but I was like, I'll get rich doing advertising. And in my advertising 101 or marketing 101 class, they had this line that was like, we study the masses so that we can manipulate them and sell things to them. And my whole soul was like, excuse me? That is maybe not something that I want to be a part of, but tell me more about this studying the masses. And so I switched to sociology and thrived. It was exactly what I wanted to study. And what was really intense about, so this is at BYU, Idaho. I didn't know if I said that. So we went to BYU, Idaho, which was a beautiful fit for a small town kid.
Yeah.
Who was LDS. I found,
and it was warmer. You got to go to a warmer climate, I think.
Warmer, but more snow.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I had never experienced snow to that extreme, where like I would walk to campus and they would plow the sidewalks and the road, but there was like the section between that they didn't plow, and like to the next to you. So you were like walking in a tunnel to school. I was like, this is wild. Never had that. But BYU, Idaho, wonderful for me. Found my Midwest crew. We were just a little bit ridiculous and had maybe too much fun. But there was a point, so I was reaching the age change for the missions hadn't happened yet. So I was reaching 21 and I was so excited because it was time for me to go on a mission. I was going on a mission. It was like, I'm going on a mission, period. It's happening. My mom served a mission in the Oklahoma area, and I loved the missionaries in our area that like taught my family and were integrated with my ward. So it was happening. I knew at age 9, I was like, I'm going to go serve a mission in Argentina. Like, I just knew it. So I, like near my birthday, went to Heavenly Father in prayer, and I said like, all right, let's go. I feel obligated to pray about this just to get an answer for sure, but I'm going to Argentina, so let's make it happen.
Love that. Tell us what happened.
Well, I got a resounding no. And I don't know that that has happened many times in my life, but it was a strong no. You're not going on a mission. And I was mad. I was mad and sad and scared, and I didn't know what to do. So it took a couple weeks for me to calm down and go to prayer, go and return to talk to Heavenly Father again and say, okay, if I'm not going to serve a mission, what would you have me do? And got a really like absolutely clear indication of what my journey needed to be. And it was finish out your bachelor's degree, go get a master's degree, work in the field for 15 to 20 years, get a PhD and teach. Like clear, verbatim. I had it written down. Yes, I can do that. And then like took steps forward. But within a couple of weeks, met my husband, Evan, and was excited to be around him and like curious and interested in dating him. And asked him, because it was on my mind, what are you doing with your life? Right? I've been on this journey to figure out what my life is supposed to be. What are you doing? And he said, well, I just graduated with a bachelor's in geology. I'm going to go get my master's degree, work in the field for 15, 20 years, get a PhD and teach. And my heart, right? My soul said, we're going to do this together.
That's cool.
It was so powerful and so needed for me as a queer member of the church to have that insight and clarity that I could do this with him.
That's really cool. Tell us more.
So we did get married really quickly because I pursued him. I was like, all right, we're getting married. Hope you're ready for it.
That's great.
And he was all in as well.
Had anybody in your family gotten a master's or a PhD?
Nope. My mom got a bachelor's from BYU in family studies, child and family development. I don't remember what they called it when she was up there, but that was the highest education attained in my family from both sides of my family.
There's a story just within the story about your career path, and I love that you were open. I think it's great that you knew what you wanted to do and knew your career, and you were going to serve a mission to Argentina. And when you arrived at BYU, Idaho, I think that's awesome. But I love that you were sensitive enough to the Spirit and to Heavenly Father's plan for you, and maybe reading your patriarchal blessing helped that. You're open to additional revelation to clarify your path. That probably came at the right time for updates to your path. I wouldn't call them like corrections to your path, but just clarifications for your path that took you down very unique roads. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming if you flew or drove to BYU, Idaho, and your older self was in the car with you and said, someday you're going to have a PhD and be doing what you're doing now, you'd go, you are nuts.
Right.
Yet,
on so many levels, that's not possible. No one in our family even knows how to do that, what that means. And you're never going to be out. So don't even think about it.
and I think it's good as both of us probably meet with people in their 20s or teens, just talking about career stuff. Just there's some principles there to just help everybody write their own story that I think are helpful. Is just it's okay. Sometimes culturally, I think we've got to just have our life planned out. And when everybody says what we're doing at age 19 to 25, we usually just want to give this perfect answer about between now and age 100. Why? I think it's okay to say I don't know, or I'm figuring it out. And I'm open to lots of different things at this point. And then maybe it's easier to receive those impressions about your best path forward. So it's really, I think
the biblical metaphor I use is to step in the water and see if the waters will part. That was a testimony that was given while I was at BYU, Idaho, that has stayed with me for a long time. I mean, all the way to now. To step in the waters, take the risk, and see if the waters will part and the path will be clear. If not, step out and try again.
That's really cool, Lacey. And I love the parting, obviously, but I love the step in. It's not like you're jumping in or fully immersed, or you can step back out. That's one of the beauties of what you just said, is that, and to me, that feels good, because then I can step into lots of water, lots of different bodies of water, and be there long enough to get a feel and see if the waters part. I like that. And you may understand things and talents about you that you wouldn't have understood if you weren't willing to do that. Yes. That's cool. So keep telling your story about just wherever you want to go.
Well, I think the next part is the coming out of it all, along with my education. So I told my husband, neither of us remember, we're either like engaged or early married. I said, hey, there's something important I want to share with you. I just want you to know that I'm bisexual. And he was like, great, cool. Thanks for letting me know. Just like absolutely relaxed and okay with it. But that was I'm going to get tearful talking about it, because our relationship is so sweet. That was what I love about him, loved and still love, is that he loves me wholly and respects me. And it is powerful to have someone see all of you and to be so vulnerable and have them just wrap their arms around you and say, like, great, you're wonderful. I love you, for all of you. So that was really, really needed in our relationship and really healing for me.
Why was it healing?
Because I walked around so scared that I wouldn't be accepted for who I am, that I would be rejected or othered, and maybe felt that way. So I had a pretty strong mask that I built and held up for everyone around me. And he was someone that I could take the mask down with and to be fully myself and vulnerable. And for him to look at me without the mask and say, I love you, meant everything to me.
It's really cool. It's great. If your good husband's listening, well done. I don't know what his story makes him the man he is and responded that way, but well done. Just keep sharing your story. You've come out now to your husband. I don't know.
And that was it.
And
I was not coming out to anyone else.
So tell us how long that went on. And it sounds like eventually that changed.
It did. I mean, yes, in a big way. So for about a decade, so our first 10 years of marriage, I stayed closeted because I love serving in the church. Whatever my spirituality and the nuance of my testimony is, I love serving in young women's. I love going to girls' camp. Those who have gone to camp with me can tell you some stories if we have a good time. And I love serving in the Relief Society. I love going into women's homes. Again, you know how to touch on really, really sensitive, important moments. In Mississippi, I lived in Hattiesburg, Mississippi for a couple of years to get my master's degree, and walked into a home where there was barely a door on the front door, and just sat on this couch that had been used and abused with a woman who was just so ill and so hurting, and watched my Relief Society president just sit as close as you could with her and hold her hand and just gently sit and talk with her and be with her. I love those moments. I want to be in these intense, painful moments with women, and not in a sexual way or anything at all, in a spiritual way. I love serving young women and women. And that comes with a big stigma if I'm out as bisexual.
Yeah.
Because then there's this idea that, like, what is she doing if she gives a young woman a ride home? Right? People have said to me that they're worried about people who are gay being pedophiles. And I was shocked that anyone still holds that belief or that thought. And so why would I come out? Why would I risk that love of service and that capacity to serve? Why would I risk that? I wouldn't. And that's how I saw it for a long, long time.
Makes sense. I mean, I would think that your fears are real, and you've heard enough stories, and I've heard enough stories that often young women's leaders change if they come out. Their callings may change, their parents' feelings about them may change. And that is a reality of our culture right now, that I think is based on fear and lack of understanding, and I think knowledge can help break the fear and recognize the good that you're doing that is there, and is out of love and concern and compassion. I love that story of the woman in Mississippi and what you and your Relief Society president did. So that makes sense not to come out. So tell our listeners why on earth, knowing full well what that might change for you in your ability to serve people you love, why would you come out then?
Because I was also in a master's degree for marriage and family therapy, and being asked to learn how to take the mask down so that I could be authentic with people who I was asking to also be authentic and to change, right? And so in my program, one of my professors had an assignment where we needed to write in a journal, and she would read it, and then we would process it together in class. For those who are MFTs or therapists, you'll know this well. And the prompt that she had given us was, tell me 3 things that I don't know about you. And the first thing I put on there was that I'm bisexual. I don't even remember what the other 2 are. I'd have to pull the journal out and look. And she, in the kindest, most open and loving way, when we got to class, said how impressed she was with the things that she learned, and that she was curious about our experiences, and asked, Lacey, is there anything that you would like to share with your classmates, with your cohort, with women that I admired? And I said, like, yeah, I want to let them know that I'm bisexual. And they lost it. They were just floored. And that was really healing. They were curious too. They were like, but what does that mean for you? You're married. What does that look like in your life? You're Mormon. And we just talked about all of that and processed it together. And that was so healing for me. So now 7 more people knew. And then I continued to have other events in that master's program to where I came out to all of the professors and to all of my classmates. And that's So that's about as far as I got. But then halfway through my master's program, I knew I needed to get a PhD. I had this momentum and excitement for marriage and family therapy and this voracious curiosity about the field and wanted to know everything I could about it. So I applied to BYU's MFT program. It's one of the best in the country. And Evan and I had a really strong prompting that we needed to live in Utah, which was very unexpected for both of us. So I applied to BYU, came out for the interview, had a wonderful time, got really excited about the program, and then got a call a couple of days later that I was accepted into the program.
Wow. That's cool. And I realize at this point, you have never lived in Utah that I'm aware of.
No. I lived in Idaho, so I got close.
You got close.
But then after BYU, Idaho, my husband and I moved to Oklahoma, where we lived for 7 years, and then Mississippi for 3, and then now Utah.
So you came to BYU. Talk about you're not, I don't know if you're out to BYU yet, or you're out to any church people or your ward.
No, not really. So what was interesting though is so during my interview, I didn't come out to even the person that I was interested in working with. But when I got here, after I got accepted into the program, I came out to her. Her name is Dr. Banford Whitting, Alyssa. And she just, again, held space for me and said, "Thank you so much for sharing them. How can I support you?" And that is all I needed to just be fully out and proud of who I was and to share that authentic self with others.
That's great. I love that the things people are doing when you come out are not very complicated. They're just loving you and accepting you. And how can I continue to support you? They're not saying, "Are you sure, Lacey?" or "You really thought about this?" or, some of the things that you might hear, you're not hearing. Talk about coming out to any church, any wards, or any of that stuff, or wherever you want to go with your story.
So then it's kind of started. So then I got a job at In-Circle Therapy. And my bishop here in South Provo area, his name is Bishop Meekum. I hope he's okay with me using his name. Is one of the most loving men that I have met in that capacity of bishop.
Cool.
And he reached out and said, "I'd love to come get a tour of In-Circle and learn more about what you're doing there." And so one Saturday we met up and he brought all of his children and we did a tour, and he said, "Why is a place like this needed in our community? I want you to tell my kids." And I said, "It's because LGBTQ kids don't have safe homes, and In-Circle provides a safe home for them." And that was so empowering for me to know that he cared.
I love that he was curious and wanted to learn. And I love that he brought his kids and wanted them to learn. And I just love that he was driven by understanding, curiosity, and a desire to understand you and recognize that perhaps you could help him in his ward because you were interning there.
Yes.
That's cool.
And that relationship continued as I opened Celebrate Therapy. The young women's leaders reached out to me because several, if not almost all of their young women are in this, well, all of them are in identity exploration moments, but are kind of exploring their LGBTQ identities. And so we talked, and we had the young women come here to Celebrate Therapy and sat down together for one of their Wednesday night activities, Thursday night. I still call them Wednesday night activities because that's when it was when I was a kid, right? So Thursday night activity. came over and they asked all the questions, and we had all the nuanced conversations with the bishop and the leaders there, supporting everything that I was saying. And that was huge. They kept looking at the bishop and looking at their leaders and being like, is this okay?
What kind of questions were they asking?
They asked, like, so what if I identify as pansexual and another girl at school identifies as pansexual and she has a crush on me and I want to date her? I said, you can date her. And they were floored. They were like, what? And I was like, you can follow the standards that the church has for chastity. You can take, you can have conversations with your family about the standards that your family wants to hold around dating and around exploring sexual orientation and gender identity, and talk about what that looks like for you. And if you're committed to stay in the church, then that limits the pool of people that you're going to date if dating is important to you. We also talked about asexuality and being aromantic and how to navigate that within the church. So it was a very powerful conversation.
Do you feel like these young women and probably young men of that age are having these kind of discussions with their families and friends at school, and they're just looking for safe places? Or do you think this was unique in this particular situation?
I know that these kids are having conversations at school or online, being super curious about identity exploration, seeing other people be out online, celebrities or people in their Discord chats, or when they're streaming, people talking about their identities. So it is in the ethos around them. It just is happening. And families are not as attentive to it, and wards are not as attentive to it. So I think what was unique about this is that the leaders said, we see you, we see these questions, and let's sit with you and talk about them. Let's pause for a minute and just be curious about your experiences. I think that was unique. And that's what I'm hopeful that families and wards can do for youth.
What would you say to parents who are naturally cautious and worry that exposing their children to any discussion about LGBTQ might confuse their children or cause exploratory behavior or cause them to be curious about something they weren't curious about before?
I immediately want to just ask them about that fear and worry within themselves. What about your child exploring their identities at a healthy developmental age is fearful for you? What's coming up for you and why? And how can you regulate that emotion so that you can show up for your kid? Because they're going to explore a variety of identities. It doesn't mean that it's a fad. It doesn't mean that it's a phase that you discredit. It means that you're there every step of the way in it with them.
That's what I've come to feel too. You have a lot more space, but we did. I think it was Ben Shalati and I did a Zoom fireside with young men's, young women's in a ward, and the bishop was really thoughtful. Had anonymous questions submitted online via Google Forms, I think, and Ben and I took some of those questions, but they were very thought out, very well educated, understood the terminology, and I recognize, and I can't generalize for the whole church because I'm just talking about one ward, and you would have maybe a better feeling because you're more connected to the youth. I just recognize they're talking about this space and they're very educated, and they want to have really these kind of discussions in faithful settings, because they can certainly have them in other settings. So I think it's important for wards and families to figure out how to talk about this stuff because our kids are talking about it.
Yes, and they by the time they're talking about it with you, they've been researching it for years, right? They have been curious about their own experience and finding communities and finding words and researching words. So it may be new to you when you first talk with them about it. And you can say, hey, if I ever like express worry or fear, just know that this is new to me and I'm learning, and I will go and take this information and find out for myself more about it. So thank you for teaching me, and I'll continue to be on this journey with you.
I love that. And I love anything that removes shame. That's one of the things that I've learned this space. There's so much shame if you're not cis or straight, that I think that can separate people from the love of God and love of themselves. So getting the shame out of the equation, I've always thought, and a therapist is often needed to do that, can help people make better decisions going forward. I'd love you to tell any more about your own story. Are you out to your bishop? I don't know where you are, if you've changed wards. Any more about that you want to share before I'd love to talk about Celebrate Therapy?
Yeah, I have moved now because I opened the practice, so we're settled. We're living in Provo permanently, which is very exciting. Yes. And I haven't had a chance to interact with my ward too much because my kids have been very sick, just with colds and stuff. But I am very nervous about my future in the church. I'm very nervous about my capacity to be in leadership positions and any discrimination that will come my way. That fear is there still, the same fear I had when I was young. But I have a community, a chosen family that supports and acknowledges me. So I'm hoping that I can navigate that fear in a different way this time.
Thanks for being vulnerable, Lacey. Are those two different fears? Your fear about your future in the church and your fear about being able to participate in the leadership callings that you feel that God would call you to, but perhaps, people wouldn't open the door for you to be considered for those callings. So just talk more about that.
Yeah, I think they are separate things, but maybe like in a Venn diagram, there is some connection between those two. I know that therapists who have spoken out for ethical practices have received, I don't remember the verbiage now, it's all changed, but like have been disfellowshipped or not able to practice and participate in their ward. But so I am worried about that. I'm not going to change my therapy practice and the ethical standards I live and work by to accommodate maybe some of the church's standards. And I know that's a very difficult place to be at, which is why I say I'm still a practicing member of the church, because I still uphold my temple covenants. And so I don't want to be discredited. I don't want to not be part of the church anymore, but I won't back down from what I believe and know to be important in people's lives and life-saving practices.
And that's probably a good segue into some of the ethical therapy and life-saving practices you're going to talk about, and maybe introduce Celebrate Therapy. So there are other places to get therapy. I would, if I'm using the right vocabulary, LGB affirming or LGB focused, and talk about your decision along with other queer therapists to open your own place.
Yes. I always have to credit Encircle Therapy for being a beautiful, incredible, nurturing environment for me to learn how to be an informed and affirming LGBTQ therapist. But I see a need in our community for a queer therapy practice where you walk in and there is just rainbow and color and celebration of identity. I wanted to provide that space and I want to work in that space. Like maybe a little bit selfishly, like I want to be my whole self in my workplace. And so I have the gumption and the fortitude to say like, all right, let me start one then. Let me make that happen. I have this community of other queer professionals that I've met through BYU and other programs, and they trusted me and said, like, yeah, let's do it. And it has just been such an honor. I mean, it's the honor of my life to have a therapy practice that's a queer therapy practice where all of the clinicians are queer, and most of them have a connection to the church in some way, but not all of us. And we represent a wide variety, even just among the four of us, a wide variety of experiences. It has been so fun to come together and collaborate, and the space has just grown and flourished. And it is exciting to be here. Like, I am constantly invigorated when I walk in the door.
I can't remember if we've talked about this. Tell our listeners when you started, when you opened the doors, and your website address.
Yes. So website is celebratetherapy.org. You can also find us on social media at Celebrate Therapy. And we opened the doors in August. So I graduated this year with my PhD and finished up my hours for licensure in circle therapy, and then got the practice legally set up, and then found a space here on Center Street and opened our doors August 2nd, which was a Monday. And my clients, again, trusted me and came with me from Encircle. Thankfully, again, so grateful for Encircle. They allowed me to continue therapy with the clients that I had. And so they came over with me, and we were able to just pick up where we left off. And they saw not much, but a lot of painting, getting furniture and putting pictures up. It's been a space that feels like a community, the queer community has like built and put together. It's been really wonderful.
Talk about your relationship with Flourish and Encircle. So those are, and now Celebrate. There's three of you sort of in Utah County. How would you frame up the relationship between all three of you?
Yes, we are very much in a partnership. We're companions in this force for good, this force for connection for the LGBTQ community. I often use the imagery of like that game of Red Rover, where we are linked arms, and I am supported by them and they're supported by me. And we're not in competition or anything. Like, we are all in this together.
That's great.
And we're supporting one another in supporting the mental health and relationship health of the queer community.
One of the questions I get the most, just people that reach out to me, they're often LDS parents that have an LGBTQ child, and they're looking for a therapist, and often they want an LDS therapist. And I think in the back of my mind, it might be because they want to keep their LGBT kid in the church, or at least someone that's church neutral. They may worry about a therapist whose goal is to get their kid out of the church because they feel their kid will do better out of the church. And so you're every therapist has their own personal story. And I like that you're being open with your story. You're LDS, you're queer. But talk about how parents should approach, this is specific to you, I guess, as a therapist, but in general also just what a therapist that's following standard ethical practices would navigate, having an LGBTQ client. It's kind of a long question, but I think you can handle it.
Yeah, I got it. I see this all the time and have had mixed experiences with it, because my ethical obligation and what I want to do is to support the growth of their child, of their divine child, right? With these queer identities, to help the child navigate exploring those identities, having a safe, secure group to do that with, and to explore how their testimony of the gospel fits with that, if it does. or if they want to step away from the church and explore other aspects of their spirituality and express them in new and different ways. My job is not to corral them into any choices, but to just help them explore and bring those to the surface, and then advocate for their needs to their parents. And for parents to sit and listen and to support their child, and then to seek healing in their own spaces.
I love that. And it's taken me a while to kind of get to that point. I think it was the therapist that taught me the principle of self-determination, which I think is consistent with our doctrine that our job is to, I'm coming this from a pastoral and a former, local YSA leader where and so I'm coming from a little different angle because I'd always would invite, and still when I meet with people, invite people to stay in the church. And you probably from an ethical standpoint would be more neutral than me, but I would then pivot and say, you've got to self-determine your best path forward and I'll walk with you. Mm-hmm. And often it's somebody like you, a therapist, that can give them the tools to make their best path forward. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the way, listeners, how I navigate this space. And I recognize that at times you may disappoint LDS parents that feel like the bishop's job is the same as your job, is to sort of keep your kid in the church. And I realize you're trying to, from a mental health standpoint, help an LGBTQ person make their best path forward. Talk more about that.
Yeah, I'll share an example. And of course, use de-identified information in this. That is an example from a client, though. It's hard to talk about because of the care that I have for the well-being of the child. But the parent was given counsel from their bishop to connect with their child by reading the Book of Mormon, and that any issues that the child was experiencing would be resolved if they just read together the Book of Mormon for 5 minutes a day, every day. And as I worked with the child on how that was going for them, was that a great time of connection with their parents? Was that meaningful to them? They were able to be honest and talk about how harmful that was for them, how disingenuous it was, and how it lacked in compassion and connection. And what they would have rather had is their parent come into their room every day and look in their eyes and say, I love you. And so we advocated for that to happen, for the parent to come into the room and say, I love you. Unfortunately, that the parent wasn't able to do that. And then found another clinician that they felt better working with, because it was a challenge that they weren't willing to change. And I hope and pray that child is okay. I know that what they need is love and connection and compassion from their parents. Every child needs that. Unconditional love, truly not conditional, that you will love them for all that they are, for every divine identity that they hold, and to not smother that or to discourage it, but to enhance it and to celebrate it.
I love that, and I'm with you on that. And I'm just, I'm with you on that, Dr. Lacey, and and our hearts both kind of are tenderhearted when we see the dissonance that's sometimes created with parents that maybe rightly so are hopeful of a certain outcome, and maybe they're grieving that outcome may not happen, but need to kind of get to a point where they're to what you described. And I don't think that means they're giving up the gospel or anything that they hold in value. I think, in fact, they come to the conclusion they're living the gospel. So many of the parents I meet with, and you know these stories better than I do, just come to the conclusion, my job is to love my kid. and not to control some certain outcome and leave any judgment to the Savior. And when they get to that point, often they're just relieved, because controlling an outcome is not really the plan anyway, but it's relieving to just kind of let go of that and say, okay, I can do that. And their eternal family isn't messed up, and their hopes for the future have changed, but I think their core eternal dreams, if you're practicing LDS, I would say, are still on the table. And let's don't decide your eternal family right now, what that might be based on where your eternal family is right now.
Yeah, and oftentimes you say, so lead with faith, right? If you're saying, well, how do I do that? How do I not lead with fear and worry? Lead with faith and curiosity, right? We have been given all the tools of the atonement and of forever families and of divine love to know how to do this. So let's use them.
And I think of what your father did for you, and even though I don't think he did that with an agenda to keep you in the church. You're smiling. I think he communicated that he is a safe person. And as a parent, I've always wanted to communicate that I'm a safe person. And so that advice for that parent to go in and tell that child over again, I love you and I support you and I see you and I'll listen to you and I'll walk with you. I think it's one of the greatest gifts we can give our parents, is that we're safe for them. So they'll open up to us about the reality of their situation, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're considering. And so we can kind of be aware of what the reality of their life. And I think those are great parenting moments. And it kind of requires us as a parent to take a back seat, maybe for our hopes or our dreams, or even the fear we have of what people in our community will think of us if we have an LGBTQ kid. And
Yes.
think about, my priority as a parent is, number one, my kid and my kid's well-being. More advice to LDS parents, or more principles you'd love to share that apply to parenthood, or more things you'd like to share with LGBTQ people?
As far as parents go, find love and support. I want to express compassion also for parents, right? I'm a parent myself. I see you parents, right? I will sit with you as well. Yes, I will advocate for your child, but I'll also advocate for your own inner child to find healing and safety. So it's not that I'm choosing sides or against parents. No, I'm with you, right? Like, I'm in this with you. Let's find healing so you can support your kid, right? Like, that's how family therapy works. That's why we do family therapy, is to help families create that space, that safe environment for their kids to thrive. And then to the queer community, just, I see you too, right? I'm in this with you, and we can navigate this. And it's going to be messy and full of fear and full of love. And we are divine, and we are created in the image of our heavenly parents and the divine, and we are loved. And I hope we can always remember that.
It's a great finishing statement. We're kind of coming up at the hour mark. I look at your personal page, and I'll just mention, listeners, Lacey also has a personal page at Lacey Bagley MFT. Is there just 3 in there? .com.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, there's a pride flag there, and it says, I see you, I hear you, I'm with you. And in some ways, I think of Christ and his personal ministry. And and I think he did everything to visually communicate as well as orally communicate that very same principles. No, he didn't have a pride flag, but I think he tried to do everything that was in his ability to communicate the very same principles. And people certainly felt safe around Christ because of all the people he surrounded him with, and that he was willing to listen and help them be seen and heard and invited to his table. Everybody was worthy to be at his table. So I think you're doing things that Christ did in the New Testament. You're a terrific person, a terrific guest. I would love to give a shout out. Tell us who your receptionist is.
Oh, yes. I was honored to share a backyard with Margaret and Travis Seward while I was renting a home here in Provo, and they became fast friends. I was at a state conference where Margaret and Travis had shared their story, and not even like a week later, I was knocking on their door to say, "Hey, neighbor, let's talk about being queer." And so we connected, and Margaret found out about Celebrate Therapy and wanted to be involved, and I needed a receptionist. She needed a receptionist job. So when you walk into Celebrate Therapy, you get to be greeted by the warm and lovely Margaret Stewart.
And that is a great couple. One of our highest listened episodes. It's episode 177, listeners. If you want to scroll way back, Travis Stewart is a returned mission president in the Houston area. And I remember the story right after his mission a few years later, he just rolled over one morning to his wife, Margaret, said, "I'm gay, been gay forever." And I need to tell you that, and just the courage, and you know that road too, to take that mask down and be vulnerable and real and share his story and all the people that they've helped. And now with Margaret being there at Celebrate, that just makes me happy. She is a terrific woman. They're just a terrific couple, and they've blessed so many lives in so many circles. Any closing thoughts you'd love to live with her? You've done such a great job, Lacey. Any closing thoughts?
I just have so much gratitude. I knew that when I drove into Utah that I would be coming out. And I'd never felt that ever in my whole life, and I was scared of it. And I am so grateful for the queer clinicians that work for me, for my chosen family of queer friends who celebrate me and support my family, my husband, my kids, who surround me with love. And I just have so much gratitude for the queer community and the allies who have fought so hard in this area and laid such a strong foundation that Celebrate Therapy could exist, right? I don't even know 5 years ago if this would have been possible. So I feel so grateful to be here in this town at this time. I know that it's divinely inspired.
I'd love to close my eyes in 5 or 10 years and see where Celebrate Therapy is. You've just opened where you are, the work you're doing, the growth of, there's been a need for this, but just the growth of meeting the need of the queer community. Listeners, I can see Lacey on my screen, and she has a beautiful green room. I think we're in your office where you do therapy. Yes. Tell us why your room is green. It's just a beautiful green. That's kind of a cool sub-story.
Yes. I grew up in northern Minnesota. We've talked about that. So imagine pine trees and lush grass, and imagine as a young child with a big imagination and a lot of emotions, walking into the woods and feeling safe there and building little fairy houses and just letting my emotions be big. And that's what the space that I wanted to create. So when you walk into my office, you walk into Minnesota.
It's beautiful. You've got multiple shades of green there. You've got a couch that's green, a chair that's green, I can see, and
a rug that's green.
I'm seeing more. And I just love that. It's just beautifully done. And it's just part of who you are. And I love that you brought part of northern Minnesota to Provo, Utah. And as I watch Lacey, listeners, there's just no shame about who she is. Her face is bright. I call it the pride of self-respect. Sometimes pride is a bad word in LDS culture, but there's this pride of self-respect, which is being our best personal selves which I think is a good thing. It's not comparative in nature. It's just each of us being our personal best and using all the talents that God has given us, including sexual orientation or gender identity, to be our very personal best, and taking those talents and using them to bless other of God's children in unique ways. And so as I look at Dr. Bagley, I'm seeing someone who has not buried her talents and is taking all those. I get tenderhearted here because there's such a need for her and her talents. And in talking to Dr. Bagley, I'm talking to you that are queer too. This is how I think your heavenly parents feel about you, is that this is a talent. This is part of your divine nature. It's a gift, and it's something that you're learning to see that way. And I think then the pride of self-respect is, I'm going to be my very best personal self. And I think that leads, and getting the shame out of the equation is key to that. And sometimes you need Jesus and a therapist to do that. And so I just kind of have a wonderful way about you, and a grace and a kindness to everybody, parents, to flourish, to encircle. You're just a bridge builder. You're a common ground person. You're the kind of people that help reduce the divisiveness in this world and help us come together as the same human family. Elder Cook, and I use this quote a lot, he talks about unity and diversity. And I even think the city of Enoch perhaps was translated not because they became the same, but because they became unified. And you can think about that for a while. I've been thinking about that for about a month since the thought came in my head. But we know there was no poor among them, which means it seems to be there a lot of love and support and understanding of those that walked a harder road. Lacey, what's the best way for people to find you? I think we've given your website. If people want to directly contact you, is your contact information there? Do you want to give that out?
Everything's on the website. You can always directly email me, Lacey at celebratetherapy.org. All of my clinicians have their information on the website. We want to be available. We want to be transparent and accessible. So please reach out. If we have time, you can just come in and chat, or set up a therapy session for you, your family, you and your spouse, whatever you need. We're here.
That's great. So this is Dr. Lacey Bagley and Richard Ostler signing off from another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.